Hello everyone, welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about how to impress in English as a lawyer and grammar mistakes to avoid. So the reason I've spoke about grammar mistakes and impressing in English in the same title is because being accurate and having good level of accuracy in your English is really important for impressing as a legal professional or any professional in a professional context. We can learn lots of fancy vocabulary and phrases and expressions which we can use to impress our colleagues and friends in English. But if we don't have the main basic structure, the foundations of English correct, then we're not going to be so accurate, we're not going to be as clear or understood, and we're not going to impress our colleagues with poor grammar, with inaccuracies, and lack of clarity in our communication. So that is why this video is all about my favorite topic. I'm sure many people's favorite topic, grammar. And I'm being sarcastic there. Well, some people do like grammar. I see it as a means to an end, and I think it can be quite fun once you get to know a topic. But it's really, really important, as I was saying, about that accuracy and everything. So, and clarity, and yeah, and just having that high level of English that you all want as a legal professional communicating in often in an international context. So, without further ado, let's get into this. I'm going to be sharing my screen at one point to show you four of some of the most common mistakes I see week after week in my job as an English coach. I teach about 20 classes a week, 20 to 25 even, so nearly 100 a month. And so these grammar topics, they come up all the time, and that is why I'm choosing them. So you can be guaranteed that they're very common ones that you may be making without even knowing it, or at least other people around you will be making these mistakes. And even as well, if you are at that advanced level and you feel like you know these already, it might be a good way to check in with your other colleagues and see, what are they really saying? What do they really mean? Because there can be a lot of misinterpretation, miscommunication with poor grammar, and it can just make things a bit inaccurate. So the first point that I want to look at is, how to be aware and to get feedback on grammar mistakes you are making. And that's a tricky one, but it's a really important one. That's why I put it as number one. So being aware of the grammar mistakes you're making and getting feedback on them. So I think the best case scenario is that if you are communicating, although this can, definitely knock the ego, but the best case scenario is that when you're communicating, either you're communicating in a real situation with your colleagues, you do get corrected in some capacity, maybe not like in a public way, but maybe after an important meeting or something, someone does correct you on that. And I think as a language learner and some, most of my students, they want, you want to be corrected, you want that honesty, you want that feedback. You don't want just to feel good about your English and not hear the truth that you're making a mistake that you might not even be aware of. So I think the best case scenario is that you are corrected and then you can correct that mistake. So either with a colleague or, of course, with the coach, with the English coach. Of course, with me and my programs, this is what I do, and this is one of the huge benefits of working one-on-one, because that's the work I do at the moment, just one-on-one individual classes with me, getting that feedback, getting that reassurance. Sometimes these are bad habits that you have made over years and years. You're saying the wrong thing all the time without realizing it, and maybe you even know that it's kind of not really accurate or great, the way you're communicating, but it's just a bad habit. You can't break this habit. So getting corrected is like the best thing, the best way of, being aware of your mistakes. But what happens if you don't get corrected, if you don't have that opportunity, or people around you aren't, it's not really their job to correct you, they don't know how to, etc. I think one thing that's important is to, I'm just reading my notes, is to pay attention to how colleagues or other people you're interacting with reply to you. Because sometimes, and I think this is a really nice way of correcting someone as well, is a native speaker or somebody who speaks English at a high level or whatever language you're speaking, they will reply to you, but they will use the correct structure. So you might say something like, I I work I work from home. I work from home at the moment. And they might say, "Oh, are you working from home at the moment?" So instead of using the present simple, you should be using the present continuous. And someone says to you, "Oh, you're working from home at the moment," instead of "I work from home at the moment." So do be listening out for these little corrections or feedback from your colleague like that. Um, the other thing is, what was I going to say? Yeah, so I think if in doubt, if you feel like there has been a misunderstanding, and whether it is in written form or spoken, and there has been some kind of misunderstanding, I would go and check it out on Google or to a teacher ideally, but on Google if you have no one else. I would use something like Grammarly. I don't know if you've heard of that, but I'll put the link in the show notes or in the chat after this live. Grammarly. This is used for improving your writing. It's for both native speakers. It's not just for language learners, it's just for people writing better English in their emails and things like that. So that will give you the better structure if there is something wrong there, and it will actually explain it to you and might even explain the grammar structure. So I would use something like Grammarly. I would go to Cambridge Dictionary and get some example sentences. If it's a particular expression you're using, a particular verb, maybe you're using the wrong preposition with it, maybe, and I'm going to get into some of the key mistakes, so we can get into that in a moment. But yeah, so three things that you can do to be aware and get feedback on your grammar. The first one, the best case, is to get that feedback directly from a colleague or your teacher if you're working with the teacher. The second thing is looking out and listening around you, listening to people replying to you, maybe with a better structure, or even speaking at a later time if you know that their English level is really at an advanced level, that they're near native or native, then you can be sure that what they're saying is correct. Like, don't look to someone else who is at the same level of English as you, but do look to someone with a more advanced level of English, that you can be sure that what they're saying is correct. So try to imitate those people. And then third thing is to go and do that research yourself on Google, on Grammarly, on Cambridge Dictionary. If there's some kind of doubt in your mind or you feel like there's been some miscommunication, check it out because it could very well be a grammar structure that hasn't been used well. And it can really, really change the meaning of things. So yeah, that is number one. Um, Yeah, and yeah, okay, that's all I'm gonna say on that because yeah, I was gonna give you another example, but I can't remember what it was going to be. Let me just share my screen. So if you have any questions so far, just let me know. I'd be very happy to answer them. So I'm just sharing my screen to show you. And so now what we're looking at is the four of the most common grammar mistakes advanced English learners like you probably make. Yeah, so that's very interesting. So I hope you can see my screen. And so there's four of them. So I'm gonna try to just, yeah, bring it down so you don't see everything all at once. So we've got four of them: tense misuse, gerund and infinitive, prepositions, and the use of articles. So I don't know if you're familiar with all of these. I think the first one is the most obvious, tense misuse. In English, we do have 12 tenses. We have four, oh no, yeah. four, like we have the past, the present, and the future, of course. And there are four different tenses in each present, four, there are four in the past, and there are four in the future. And yeah, they can be misused, and it can in affect your communication. I'm only going to look at two of them today. It's really not possible to go really in detail into these, but these are all included in my Fluent English Lawyer Accelerator. I have 6 modules on grammar, and this is something, accuracy is a very important part of your English fluency and boosting your English fluency and communication skills. So that's why it's really important. So yeah, you could get more information on that on my website. But for now, let's look at tense misuse, and I have 2 examples here. So the first thing about tense misuse is a very obvious one is like looking at the present continuous and the present simple. So let's have a look at that. Um, okay, so I hope you can see that. Yeah. So present continuous and present simple. So these are misused all the time, and they can change the meaning quite a bit. So if you look at the first example, someone might say, I speak with my colleague now. But what you should be saying is, I am speaking with my colleague now, because present continuous is now at the moment. So you're using that present continuous to talk about something that's happening now at the moment. And then on the other hand, you could misuse it in the other way by talking about some kind of regular activity like a habit. For example, I'm working at home every day. It should be I work at home every day. Every day, it's a regular activity, it's a habit. So it should be the present simple. That is when we use the present simple. And I'll just put in every day because that wasn't written in. But yeah, so misusing those two, definitely. And I'm going to give you a more advanced example here. If you look at the third sentence, it says, I am smelling the cake. I can't wait to eat it. So you're smelling something. This is a sense. This is one of the 5 senses that you're using. And it's true. When you're looking at this example sentence, it is happening now. So logically, it should really be the present continuous that you are smelling it. But actually, for these kind of sensory verbs, we use the present simple. So it should be, I smell the cake. It's the same with things like feelings, anything that's a bit more, not so much of an action, more abstract. So you don't say, I am loving it or I am liking it, except for the McDonald's ad, if you know, I am loving it. But yeah, in general, in English, we'll say, I like, I love. We'll talk about I believe, I agree, not I am agreeing, I am believing. Now, that's a very good example because a lot of people say I am agree. That is not always about the difference between present simple and present continuous. I am agree, I think, comes from the Latin languages because, for example, in French, je suis d'accord is literally I am agree. But yeah, you don't say I am agreeing, you say I agree because this is not an action verb, even though it's right now that it's happening, so it should be present continuous. It's present simple because it's more of a feeling, more abstract. Okay, so that was the first example there of tense misuse. The second one I wanted to look at is with will and would. Now, let's look at these 2 examples and tell me what is the difference here. I will be happy to see you, and I would be happy to see you. Now, both of those actually could be used. It just depends on the context. So, will is more in the future anyway. Like, would is the past of will. But when we're looking at the future, we're looking at something that is probably going to happen, which is will. And with would, we're looking at more of an imagined situation. So if something very standard in emails is, I would be happy to see you, um, I would be happy to, I would be happy to meet you if you come to Ireland in the future. So this is more imagined. There's no guarantee that this is going to happen. That's why we would use would. And with will, I will be happy to see you when you come to Ireland. It's more of the reality in the future. Okay, so those are two little points in tense misuse between about present continuous, the present two present tenses here, and also looking at will and would. Okay, so we're 15 minutes in and we've got three more different grammar points. And as I said, I'm not going into huge detail here. I just really want to give you that understanding of it. And so you can maybe go away and think about how you've been using or misusing it and how you can understand these grammar points better. Because I think sometimes when you learn English, you might have learned it in a more of a natural way and not so much in a textbook looking at things. And I think learning English naturally by listening to lots of things is a really great way to learn a language. But sometimes when we get to making bad habits and making mistakes with our grammar, it's always helpful to look back, to revise, to refresh, or to learn for the first time some of these grammar points because they really do form the foundation, the building blocks of English. Okay. So the next one is gerund and infinitive. This is a very interesting one. Now, gerund is, I'll give you the example. Well, there are some examples here, but basically the difference between gerund is I like going to the shop every day. Or, and that's gerund. And then infinitive is I like to go to the shop every day. So infinitive, it's to plus infinitive verb. And the gerund is the verb plus ing. So it's like the main verb and then the verb plus ing. And then with the infinitive, it's the main verb plus to plus in plus infinitive verb. And in these two sentences, you might be wondering what's the difference. Well, actually, there's no difference. There might be some tiny little nuance here, but you can say exactly the same. You can say both. You can say, I like going to the shop or I like to go to the shop. But there are some situations um, where gerund is only used and you can't use infinitive. So we're going to look at the basis of gerund first of all. So as you can see, gerund, a good way to look at it is that it's often something real, concrete, and that's completed or finished. So there are some cases where we can only use the gerund with this verb. So this is the verbs only with gerund and not with infinitive. So these are legal examples, legal English examples. You've got the first one. She admitted forging the document. So to admit something is to admit doing something. So you can't say she admitted to forging she admitted to forge the document. Just doesn't work. Doesn't sound very good on the ear. Really just yeah, using that, I mean we would understand it, but it just sounds very out of place. Um the defendant denied committing the crime. So you wouldn't use here the infinitive either. So both of these examples are only with gerund, deny and forge. And how are you going to remember that? Like, that's a good question. What I've written down here is, where did I write it? Oh, I don't know if I wrote it down, did I? Um, yes, actually it's here, sorry. Yeah, if you were writing some notes, I would write it like that. Yeah, actually that's actually the other one. Sorry. No, but what I would do if I was learning that, I would say to admit plus gerund or to deny plus gerund. I would just make a running list of maybe in Excel, I would make a list of gerund and infinitive verbs and try to remember them in that way. I think naturally over time you're going to learn which one sounds better together, but there's no magical rule except for realizing that gerund is normally real, concrete, and completed. So here in this example, she admitted forging the document. This is something that's finished. She did this already. The defendant denied committing the crime. Again, it's something real and concrete that was completed already. Now, there's also an example where you can say it's with gerund and infinitive. Now, I'm going to give you, no, actually, what I'm going to do, I'm sorry about this. I'm going to look at that in a moment. We're going to move on first to infinitive. So you see here with the gerund that these verbs only go with gerund. And now we go into infinitive and we'll have a look with verbs with both gerund and infinitive in a moment. So with infinitive, it's generally on real, abstract, or future. So here the attorney agreed to represent the client. So here agreed to represent. This is not something that is completed. It's going to start after he agrees. So he agrees and then he's going to represent the client. So this is definitely future. That's how you can remember it. The judge ordered the witness to testify. So he order is like ask, and he asked the witness to testify. Again, it's something in the future. So that's the infinitive. Now, there are some verbs with gerund and infinitive, like I was saying, so I just want to cover that. And if you look at these two examples, let's read them. So I stopped smoking and I stopped to smoke. So I stopped smoking is about quitting. You know, I stopped smoking last year and I haven't started again. You know, it's I quit. And you know, when you stopped smoking last year, it was something that was real. And then when you stopped, was it? So it's something in the past. As we talk about gerund, it's real, it's concrete, it's completed. That's why we use gerund. I stopped smoking. Now, the second example, I stopped to smoke, and it's infinitive. It's on real, abstract, or future because you stop. I was doing something and then I stopped. The smoking hadn't happened yet. So because it's a future, something that I stopped. Like if I was on a walk, I stopped to smoke. Completely different meaning here between the gerund and infinitive. You need to be really careful with that when you're communicating, and that can cause a lot of miscommunication if you use I stopped to smoke or I stopped smoking. So again, to remind that I stopped smoking is when it's finished in the past because that's with the gerund, is completed. But I stopped to smoke is just you stopped your class, you stopped what you were doing so that you could go for a smoke, so that you could go to smoke. Okay, I hope that is clear. Do ask if you have any questions. We're at 23 minutes now, and we're on to number 3, which is prepositions. Now, there's all different kinds of prepositions. I'm sure you've come across them before, especially the ones about in, on, at, prepositions of place, you know, location when you're giving directions, when you're talking about something in a room. But dependent prepositions, these are specific prepositions for more advanced learners that are really important to know about. They are used with certain verbs, adjectives, or nouns. And I have a few examples for each one here. So as I think I showed you this already a little bit, but verb plus preposition, you just need to learn it like in this way. And you have two examples here, again, legal English examples. Accuse of, he was accused of fraud, and appeal to. The defendant appealed to a higher court. And this can be a really, you know, bad mistakes. It can show up a lot in written English, in emails, when you have the wrong preposition. I know it can be really frustrating as an advanced learner to make these kinds of mistakes when your English is at a really good level, but you're making these mistakes. I would nearly put it down to it being like when I'm learning in French, masculine and feminine. It's hard to know sometimes. But I would say the best way to write this, and I have an example, yeah. Like when you're writing your notes, I would suggest you write it like that. To accuse someone of something, to appeal to a body or institution. So you can learn it like that. So that's verb plus preposition. Then you have adjective plus preposition, so responsible for and aware of. He was responsible for preparing the case. And I'm sure you hear this all the time. You hear about responsible for. So you probably already kind of hear it naturally. And then aware of the potential risks. Then you have noun and preposition, so like a decision on, an agreement with, a decision on the matter, an agreement with the opposing party. So again, that these are really important to remember. Maybe as well, I don't know, there's all kind of ways that you could memorize, but a way maybe with agreement with, you could kind of like a mnemonic, is that what it's called? Like AAW, an agreement with. I think it depends what kind of learner you are, but I think I would probably find that quite helpful. A decision on is a do a decision on. So just doing it like that, it might help. It might not help, but finding your own way to try to memorize and learn these will help. But again, you'll hear it come up a lot naturally as well. So it will go in there eventually. You just need to keep working on it. And so finally, the fourth area that we're looking at are articles. Articles, which I mean are like a and the, and also just nothing. So I'll show you what I mean. So we have the first two sentences, two examples. We are going to a restaurant tonight. This is indefinite, it's not specific. A restaurant could be any restaurant. And then we are going to the restaurant tonight. This is definite, it's specific and unique. And I hear this mistake a lot, that people say, we like going to the restaurant. But when you say it like that, we like going to the restaurant, it just sounds very like a specific place where you're just talking about restaurants in general. Actually, in this case, you could say we like going to restaurants in general. So actually, you don't need an article, and that's general. It's a zero abstract. It's general. It's abstract. Um, yeah. So another example with law, like I already put this here because this one doesn't have an article. I'm studying law at university. It's a zero article. It's got no the, no a, because it's general and abstract. So when you look at going back to we like going to restaurants with no the, with no a, it's more of a general concept. The idea of restaurants is more abstract. So think about how you say that when you talk about a restaurant. Do you talk about a restaurant, which is not specific, but just a restaurant in general? Do you talk about the restaurant, which is specific? It's one particular restaurant. Or do you talk about restaurants, something general, abstract? I like restaurants. I like a restaurant. I like their restaurant. So which one do you mean when you're discussing this? So finally, the last sentence here about articles. I am studying law at university. Not the law, not a law. Usually the law might be the mistake, but this is a zero. It's general or abstract. Law is an abstract, general subject that you can study at university. But versus the law is interpreted on a case by case basis. The law. The law, it's a definite article, it's specific. Okay. So that is all for the four mistakes I hear all the time with my students. So just to review that, we looked at tense misuse, we looked at gerund and infinitive, prepositions, and articles. So if you want to go back on any of that I covered, feel free to look at the recording again. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. And if you'd like more on it, as I said, it's all in my accelerator. When you apply, I can give you more information on that, but there are 6 modules in the accelerator on this. So we cover everything and get you to that level where you feel more confident and you're not making those silly mistakes anymore. You've gotten out of the habit. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and I'm going to read, not read, but give you the final point of the video, which was all about, and let me just, yes, I'm going to read it. Yeah, the strategies for improving your grammar so you can speak more accurate English. I think I've given you a few things as we went along about strategies you can use to improve your grammar. But the first thing I would do is to do some research on your own, especially if you don't have access to me individually as or a teacher as well. I'm going to give you a little secret. If you type in, let's say, prepositions, if you type in prepositions to Google, it's going to be not the best search. So I would type in prepositions and then the word or the acronym ESL, which stands for English as a Second Language. So if you type in prepositions ESL, you're going to get a lot of content which is geared towards teachers and students who are English learners. You'll get worksheets, you'll get websites that are great on that subject. You'll probably get more than you want to that you will be able to deal with. You know, there's just so much content out there on prepositions, but I think it's a great way to start. And you can start looking at, now I would say, especially for me as a visual learner, I really find the infographics very helpful. Any kind of image kind of content, looking at a graph of the verbs visually, it really helps me. But you might be different if you're more of an audio learner. There are definitely videos and podcast content that you can look at. And I would say, yeah, this is a very, very important point, but try to understand the concept before learning. Sometimes there is nothing to really understand, like there is no rule, but there usually is a rule. Like there's usually some kind of basic rule. It mightn't always stick to that rule, but I think the general rule can really help. Like I explained with the gerund and infinitive and also the articles, also with the tenses, there's usually some kind of rule. So try to understand that, and it's going to help you make that decision and communicate and remember how to use this grammar structure. Then the other thing you can do is to do grammar exercises. There's plenty of practice on all of these topics that I've covered in this video that you can look on when you Google this. But of course, there are courses and things that you can that will be more efficient, let's say, efficient with your time, because there's some content out there that isn't high quality. It might be too easy, it might be too difficult, it might not be accurate. Some of these things, you know, anyone can put anything up online, so you never really know the quality of the content. But there definitely are some reliable sources out there to use for some grammar exercises that you can do for free. Um, the next thing is about just organizing your notes. So I would try to record your grammar notes in one place. As I suggested in this video, I think Excel is a great option. And you write some example sentences that will really help. And as I also kind of showed you there are lots of memory techniques you can use that can really help to try, you know, memorize these things. And that is something that you will have to do at the end. After understanding, after doing exercises, you may still find that you need to memorize some of this grammar, especially, you know, the irregular verbs. That's a very common thing that we all need to know very well. Be, was, been, become, became, become. There's no way of getting around that. If you don't know these irregular verbs, it's going to make your life much harder. So yeah, that's all, and I want to keep it under 35 minutes if I can. So thank you for joining me live or for the recording. I'm going to put some links and more information down in the description, also including my website if you want to check out more information there. And I'll be making another video very soon, next week, I hope. So I'll see you for the next video, and thank you for watching again.